Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. We have a new post from President Nelson, and it has to do with the rededication of the Salt Lake Temple, specifically the dates of the open house. And we've been waiting for this for a long time. The renovation of the Salt Lake Temple has kind of been a theme during President Nelson's presidency. This is the first time that it's going to be rededicated. And I think it goes beyond that. With President Nelson's focus on the Second Coming and what we know about the Salt Lake Temple, I think that this is something pretty profound. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to the Salt Lake Temple and why the rededication would be profound, we're going to go over that. There might be something here that you haven't heard before. I think there's reason to look to this rededication. I really do. And there's some other interesting things to think about with this post. You see all the highlights. Now, I would have published this today. I'm recording this on Friday night, but my family and I were busy going up to Independence, Missouri. Here's a picture I took of the Independence Visitor Center, which is a temple in waiting. It was built to be a temple and part of the 24 temple complex, but it's currently being used as a visitor center. And we were there because we were looking at a property, and we're probably going to move in the next couple of weeks. So the time has come for us to move from Kansas to Missouri. I've been talking about it for a while now, and I was thinking that we wouldn't do it until like summer or possibly even not until next year. But the way that things worked out, it looks like it's going to be sooner than later. It's not 100% for sure right now, but it probably will be sometime next week, and I'll keep you updated on that. So we are really excited. Let's go to President Nelson's post. Before we do, make sure to follow me on Instagram for additional content. The link is in the description box below. And let's start just by reading what he said in the post. On February 14th, 1853, a groundbreaking ceremony in Salt Lake City began a 40-year journey of faith and sacrifice culminating in the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple in 1893. A current and comprehensive renovation to strengthen this sacred house of the Lord for future generations is now nearing completion. Today, exactly 172 years after the groundbreaking ceremony, I am delighted to announce that the temple will reopen for tours during a public open house from April 2027 to October 2027. We warmly invite our friends to come and learn about God's plan for his children and rejoice in the love of Jesus Christ. Details about this event will be shared as April 2027 approaches. As houses of the Lord now dot the earth, I invite you to cherish your time and service at the temples closest to you as we prepare for the reopening of the Salt Lake Temple in 2027. And I wonder if he would also say, as we prepare for the second coming. I really think that what's happening right now with the Salt Lake Temple is related, and I think a lot of you would agree. Okay, so he points out a lot of numbers here. The 40-year journey, the 40 years that it took to construct the Salt Lake Temple. He points out that he's announcing this exactly 172 years after the groundbreaking for the temple. We've noticed President Nelson, it seems like he really likes numbers, and he likes symbolic numbers. And I think it would probably go beyond just liking them. I think that he's inspired. He's a prophet of God. And he has said before, let me just remind you, with the 2020 hashtag Give Thanks video message on the church blog, and then also from a talk by Sherry Dew, between the two of those, both of those told us that President Nelson wanted that message published at a very specific time on a specific date, and even the length of the video was supposed to be a specific amount of time. So he does think this way. And one thing I want to point out is that it seems like he especially focuses on the number 7. So much so that I had to keep track of it on this spreadsheet called Prophets Sevens. And this is a collection of social media posts, first presidency messages, general conference talks, Liahona articles where he'll do things in 7s. And there was a really interesting thing that happened starting in September of 2023, where he did 2 social media posts where he repeated a word or a phrase 7 times. The first one was the Book of Mormon. The second one was conference. These 2 posts are 7 days apart. And then from that month on, for 7 months in a row, he would do one social media post that would repeat a word or a phrase 7 times. In October, things celestial. November, prayers. And then so on. And then the 7th month was March of 2024. That's the month that the church purchased the Kirtland Temple. I don't know that it's related, but that's where that series ended. And then it seemed to be over because there was nothing in April. And then it kind of continued in May and then in June, but then it stopped. There have been other times where 7s have been used, like this first presidency message about the new medical school for BYU. They repeated medical school 7 times in this Facebook post. 2 days in a row. On the same day, I'm sorry. On August 1st of 2024, instead of President Nelson, you had President Oaks and President Eyring both do a social media post, and it's like they followed suit. President Oaks did 7 references to Christ, and President Eyring did 7 times of the word faith. And you can see it highlighted right here in these colors. And then nothing that I know of from August to October. And so you get the idea. This goes back, let's see, the earliest one that I have is October of 2017, but it is a thing that he does. Here you have his global ministry tour that he went on his first year as president of the church. And guess how many countries he went to outside of the United States? 7. The Salt Lake Temple. Okay, so let's circle back around to the Salt Lake Temple. This is my spreadsheet called Prophets Talks. There's a lot of things on here, but we're just going to focus on column R. Okay. So I noticed that there were 7 general conferences in a row. Okay. From here to here. So from October 2018 general conference until October 2021 general conference. 7 conferences in a row where in one of his talks, he would mention the renovation of the Salt Lake Temple, and he would use it as an object lesson. And then after that, that was it. He has said, the name Salt Lake Temple in other talks, but he did not use it in the same way that he did for these 7 general conferences in a row. I think it's intentional. There's a lot of things that he does that seems very, very intentional. And this is just one of them. So going back to the post, I wanted to see, did he do another 7? It's been a while since he's done that with his social media. I don't know really that he did. I do want to point out that he repeats either Salt Lake Temple or Temple 6 times. There could be a 7th time if you want to include public open house, but a public open house is not, that's an event. It's not a temple. It's not a structure. It's something that happens to a structure. You have a brand new building, and before it goes into operation, you may have a public open house so that the public can come and see it before it gets into operation. But it's something that you do. It's not a verb, but it's it's an event. So that's why I'm hesitant to say that there's 7 instances of temple or Salt Lake Temple, but I'll leave that to you. Let me know in the comments. Do you think that this is a 7? For right now, I'm not going to put it on the spreadsheet, but depending on how you respond, maybe I will. And if it is, then it'll be the most recent 7. The most recent one before that is from the first presidency, where they repeated pronouns of Christ, like he, his, 7 times. The one before that was President Nelson's big second coming talk of October 2024 General Conference, where he brought up the second coming 7 times. So those are the 2 most recent instances. Well, I guess it's worth noting, not just the October 2024 General Conference, but the October Liahona, he wrote an article called A Pattern for Unity in Christ, and he had 7 like principles of unity right here. These are the 7 in his article. Okay. So you let me know. Now, okay. So he talks about the open house going from April 2027 to October 2027. That seems like it lines up with these general conferences. I'm sure that something will be said during each conference that year about the Salt Lake Temple. So maybe that's why they planned it that way. So what does that mean for the actual rededication? When is that going to take place? Well, we don't know. It hasn't been announced, but what we can do is we can look at other temples that have been recently rededicated. So I'm on churchofjesuschristtemples.org, a really good resource for temple facts and news. And we have the Mesa, Arizona temple that was recently, like relatively recently, rededicated in 2021. So what happened there in yellow is that that open house went from October to November, and then the rededication was I don't know, almost a month later on December 12th. So you have a period of time after the end of the open house, about like a month in this case, and then the temple gets rededicated. We have the Washington, D.C. temple. Okay. The open house went from April until June, and then it was rededicated in August. In this case, a little bit over a month after the end of the open house. And then one last example, we have the Manti, Utah temple, which was rededicated by President Nelson. I did a video about that because it was expected that Elder Rasband was going to rededicate it. But only a few people knew that it was going to be President Nelson. It was like a big surprise. And I feel like you could see it as a foreshadowing of the second coming, how Christ just, at some point, it's going to happen. And you're going to think that you have all the time in the world. You're not. Everyone's going to still be living their lives, marrying and giving in marriage and eating and drinking and working and doing all this stuff. He comes at a time that we think not. And in this case, President Nelson unexpectedly showed up at this rededication. But the open house went from March until April, and then it looks like a few weeks later. So the last day of the open house was the 5th of April, and then the rededication was on April 21st. So just a few weeks later. So if it follows that pattern, I guess we can expect the rededication to happen maybe late October or possibly sometime in November. I guess we'll see. So it looks like that's what we're looking at. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. I have this spreadsheet called Prophets, President Nelson's social media, where I just kind of, I tally up the number of posts that he does each month. I did this because there was a little bit of a pause going on right here in August and July of last year. I didn't know if that was normal for him, so you have to go back and see. And it's happened a couple times. It's not typical, it's not usual, but it has happened before. But anyway, he's done one post every month since October, and there were 2 in September. Here's the 7s that we were talking about earlier, from September 2023 until March 2024. Skip April, and then it kind of started up again in May and June. So, and then I guess the jury's out on this one for this month. Let me know. Put it in the comments below. Okay, moving on. The fact that it's going to be most likely rededicated in 2027 is kind of interesting because, again, 7s show up all the time. It makes me think of the St. George, Utah temple, which was originally dedicated in 1877. It makes me think about the Palmyra, New York temple, which Gordon B. Hinckley at that time said that this was perhaps the most important temple in the church because of its location right by the Sacred Grove. And that temple was the 77th temple of the church. And it was also dedicated on April 6th, but that's a topic for a whole other video. I've done that before. Just do a search for April 6th on my channel. You'll find it. So anytime that there's like a 7 involved, even if it seems just like it doesn't really matter, like, 2027, It may matter. It really could. But you have a bunch of other temples here that were dedicated in like, you have 2017 that has a 7. You have temples that were dedicated on the 7th of whatever month it was. So I don't know, but that just kind of stuck out to me. Um, okay, let's look at this now. Okay, so this rededication, I really think it's really special. Let's start. Let's do this. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so this is my spreadsheet called quotes A through Z. This is currently row 461 for Salt Lake Temple, 4 angels released. If you're new to the channel, you may not have known this before. Maybe you did, but let's read this. This is from President Joseph Fielding Smith, president of the church at that time when he said this. You can find this in Doctrine and Covenants Student Manual, published 2001, page 191. I need to actually just like find the primary source for this. It's just I haven't gotten around to doing that. Okay, so it says President Joseph Fielding Smith, who was present when President Wilford Woodruff talked about these angels at the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple, recorded the following. Now, keep in mind, the Salt Lake Temple, let's go back here, has not been rededicated since it was first dedicated. This will be its first rededication, opposed to, say, the Mesa Temple, which, let's see, it had its original dedication 1927, and then it was rededicated 1975, and now it's had its third rededication in 2021. The Salt Lake Temple, no. This is going to be the first rededication. With that in mind, let's go back here. Quote, one day, while I was sitting in the presence of my father, President Joseph F. Smith, back about 1908 or 9, somewhere in there, I called attention to these statements of President Woodruff, and I said I would like to go over the records from the time of the dedication of the temple up until now and see what I can find in regard to calamities, destructions, plagues. And he encouraged me to do it, and so I did. So I went over the newspapers and over the magazines and jotted down year by year the destructions, the commotions among men, everything in the nature of a calamity. And to my great astonishment, each year they increased. And they've been increasing ever since I quit making that record. I was greatly astonished by it. And when I called the attention of one of my neighbors to it, big mistake, by the way, depending on who the neighbor is, he almost got angry at me. And he said, oh, well, we have got better facilities now for discovering these things. I don't believe it. And he is a member of the church too, but seemed to lack faith in these predictions. Okay, let's read this one. This is also Joseph Fielding Smith. This is in a book by him called Signs of the Times, published 1974. Now, I want to make some comments in regard to the statement by President Woodruff in this parable, the parable of the wheat and the tares, in Doctrine and Covenants 86. The Lord said that the sending forth of these angels was to be at the end of the harvest, and the harvest is the end of the world. Now, that ought to cause us some very serious reflections. And the angels have been pleading, as I've read it to you, before the Lord to be sent on their mission. Until 1893, when the Salt Lake Temple was dedicated, until 1893, the Lord said to them, no. And then he set them loose. According to the revelation of President Woodruff, the Lord sent them out on that mission. What do we gather out of that? That we are at the time of the end. This is the time of the harvest. This is the time spoken of, which is called the end of the world. So I have a few more quotes. I'm not going to read the rest of them, but you can access my spreadsheets anytime. The link is in the description box of each video. You have President Woodruff saying it himself during a temple workers excursion shortly after the temple was dedicated. But so the point is, if those angels were let loose at the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple, and now here we are all these years later, maybe it's going to be the end. Maybe their mission is going to come to an end. Maybe we're not even going to make it to the rededication. I'm sure that it will be rededicated, like say that the second coming, all the appearances, Say that they happen before the rededication of the Solid Temple, then maybe it'll be rededicated in the first part of the millennium. Who knows? I want to remind you of the story of Israel wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And after that time of being purified as a people and the older generation dying away, and the Lord preparing them to possess the promised land, after the 40 years, it was time to possess the promised land. I feel like it's a foreshadowing of the saints inheriting the earth during the millennium. I really do. And I've done a bunch of videos talking about Jericho. That's the first time that you see 7 trumpets in the scriptures. And I feel like it's a foreshadowing of the destruction of the wicked and the righteous inheriting the earth. So you have Israel. They enter the promised land, and they have the tabernacle with them. And, they go through this process. And then after entering the promised land, that's when the tabernacle goes to Shiloh, and it stays there for like over 300 years. And then after that, then the temple is built by Solomon in Jerusalem. And I feel like this could be a pattern for the millennium. So say that you have the second coming happen, and then we enter into the millennium. And then shortly after that, the Salt Lake Temple, which could parallel the tabernacle at Shiloh, is rededicated, right? And then after a period of time, you construct the 24 temple complex in Independence, Missouri. And then there's a permanent change of church headquarters from Salt Lake to Independence, Missouri, or what will then be the city of Zion in Jackson County. And then, of course, you'll also have Old Jerusalem, which will be the other world headquarters. I feel like something like that could happen. So I'm not going to say, well, no, we got plenty of time. The Lord's not going to come. All of his appearance won't take place before 2027 because the Salt Lake Temple has to be done first. I wouldn't be so sure about that. I wouldn't be so sure. I won't be surprised either way. But I'm just keeping an open mind because, again, we're informed in the scriptures that Christ will come at a time that we think not. And I feel like that means things are going to happen in a way that we don't expect. And then all of a sudden we're going to be like, whoa, wait, what? I thought this was supposed to happen first. I thought we were still like at least 100 years away, maybe 1,000. So I would just be careful with that. I really, really would. And just wait and see what actually happens. So let's see. Is that it? Yeah, I'm gonna skip it. Well, let me just say this. Let's finish with this. This is my spreadsheet called quotes, numbers. We're talking about all these 7s. We're talking about the fact that it seems like the Salt Lake Temple is going to be rededicated in 2027, and the open house dates were announced today, which is the 14th, but that's 2 7s. And you think about Joseph Smith when he was 14 years old when he had the first vision. So the number 7 and 2027 may be perfect. What does 7 mean? Well, in this church manual, Scripture Study, The Power of the Word Teacher Manual, on page 54, 7 means whole or complete, fullness. So again, maybe that's perfect for the Salt Lake Temple. This part of the last dispensation, maybe it's going to be complete, full, whole. From the Old Testament Student Manual, Genesis to 2 Samuel, it says, the prevalence of the number 7 in the Lord's dealing with Jericho's defense is significant. Throughout the law of Moses, 7 was used numerous times to signify the covenant. Its association with the covenant probably stems from the idea that 7 is associated with completion, fulfillment, and perfection. Okay. We also have a couple other items here that I want to share with you. Okay, so Doctrine and Covenants 121. This is the scripture that was written when Joseph Smith was in Liberty Jail, which is not too far from Independence, Missouri, by the way. And this is the one where he says, O God, where art thou? And where is the pavilion that covereth thy hiding place? And it turns out that after he pleads with the Lord and asks these questions, the Lord responds in verse 7. My son, peace be unto thy soul. Thine adversity and thine afflictions shall be but a small moment. And then President Nelson points out in his Big Second Coming article in the Ensign and Liahona of April 2020, the name of the article is The Future of the Church, Preparing the World for the Savior's Second Coming. He says, this work is empowered by a divine announcement made 200 years ago. It consisted of only 7 words. This is my beloved son, hear him. So in this case, 7 was something that started something. It initiated the last dispensation. So, and it could be both. You know, the rededication of the Solid Temple, it could be a beginning and an end. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, make sure to follow me on Instagram. And then make sure to subscribe on YouTube. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.